Dust floated slowly across the prairie, curling it along the dry fences like smoke. By the time she noticed the figure leaning against the post at the edge of her land, the sun had dipped just low enough to cast long, suspicious shadows. He didn't look like trouble, but in a place like Redwillow, just being unknown was enough. She paused, one hand still on the bucket of water she had carried from the well. Her dress clung to her calves, heavy with sweat and chores, and her hair was pulled tight into a bun streaked with gray. She hadn't had visitors in 3 months, especially not men, not since the last time ended with bruises on her arm and whispers. In town that she asked for it, the man raised a hand slowly, not in threat but in need. His lips were cracked, dust covered his shoulders like ash, his hat hung low over eyes that didn't quite meet hers. He didn't ask to come in, didn't even ask for water. Still, she gave it. He drank from the tin cup like it was sacred, careful not to spill a drop. Then he sat on the edge of her porch without invitation and pulled off his boots, revealing a sockless foot wrapped in stained cloth. "You're hurt," she said. He looked down, then back at her, almost surprised by the fact. "I've walked far," he murmured, voice dry and deep. "You look like you've run farther." He didn't answer, just nodded once as if that was all the story he planned to give. She stood there, torn. Redwillow didn't take kindly to strangers, even less to women who helped them, but the man wasn't drunk, wasn't loud, didn't smell like liquor or blood. He smelled like sage and road and something else she couldn't name. "I ain't got much," she said, turning toward the barn, "but the hay's dry and the door latches from the inside." He didn't move. "You can sleep there. You come in my house, we'll have problems." Still, he didn't move. She sighed. "Well, suit yourself. Water's in the barrel. I don't ask questions and I don't answer none either." He looked at her then, really looked, though his eyes were sunken and shadowed. There was something soft behind them, a kind of peace not common in men on the run. "What's your name?" she asked. He paused, then quiet as dusk. "Jonah." She nodded once sharply. "Don't make trouble, Jonah." He shook his head. "Didn't come for that." And with that she turned back to the house, her boots crunching on dry soil, heart thudding louder than the wind. She had just given shelter to a man who came for peace, and deep down something in her already knew. That peace was the one thing this town would never let him have. Her name hadn't been spoken in church since the funeral. 3 winters ago she stood alone behind a pine box while the preacher mumbled something about mercy. But the real message was clear. Her husband didn't belong in consecrated ground. He wasn't white, wasn't baptized in their river, wasn't one of them. So they buried him beyond the fence next to unmarked stones and broken bottles. No one brought her food, no casseroles, no hymn singing on the porch. Just silence, like a blanket soaked in judgment. Since then she hadn't gone back, not to church, not to town dances, not to potlucks or quilting circles. When people passed her on the street, they pretended not to see her. Some kids called her a witch. The adults didn't correct them. The only things that came to her now were wind, dust, and the occasional letter addressed simply, "To the widow near Ridge Hill." Even the mailman never walked past her gate. She didn't care much. She had her chickens, her garden, her old mule. She had quiet, and quiet, at least, didn't lie. But that morning the quiet felt different. From the kitchen window she saw him again. Jonah, standing outside the barn, barefoot, shirt clinging to his back from the night's heat. He wasn't moving, just staring out at the hills like he missed something too far to name. She made him a plate, left it on the porch, didn't knock, didn't call. When she checked an hour later, the food was gone. The plate was wiped clean, and under the napkin he had left a silver coin. She hadn't asked for payment, but he gave it anyway. Later, as the sun reached its cruelest angle, she hitched the mule and rode the wagon into town. The flour was almost gone and the oil lamp near empty. She wore her best apron, though it was faded from years of sun. Folks looked like always, but said nothing. At the general store, Mr. Talbert grunted when he saw her. "You been busy up there on the ridge?" She laid the sack of flour on the counter. "Garden's coming in slow." "That's so," he said, squinting. "Heard tell someone saw a man near your property. Tall fella, strange kind of walk." She met his eyes. "We get coyotes sometimes." Might have been one of those. "Coyote wear boots?" She didn't answer, just took her goods and left. Outside, 3 boys stood near the pump whispering. Evan Pike grinned wide when she passed. "Hey, widow," he called. "You digging graves? Jen are just feeding ghosts." The other boys laughed. One spat near her foot. None of them looked older than 15. She stared at Tommy a long second. "Tell your mama I said thank you for the pie." His face flushed. She moved on. That night she sat on the porch with her shotgun resting across her lap. The barn door was shut, lantern off. Jonah hadn't made a sound, but she knew he was in there breathing quiet like someone who'd spent too much time learning not to be noticed. She watched the sky bleed into stars and remembered how her husband used to point out constellations like they meant something. Every man's story is written up there, he'd say. You just gotta know how to read it. But no one in Redwillow ever wanted to read hers. They'd rather write her ending for her. One where she stayed silent, alone, yet here she was again, sheltering someone the town would rather forget. And maybe that said more about her than any name they refused to call her by. The third morning she found him mending her fence. She'd gone out early with feed for the chickens, expecting silence, maybe a nod if their paths crossed. But there he was, shirt off, skin brown from sun and hard living, hammering a new slat, where the boards had split during the last storm. He didn't look at her, just drove the nail in with measured swings. Not fast, not slow, the way a man works when he's thinking of something else. You don't have to do that, she said. He paused. It needed doing, that was all. She stood there, arms folded, squinting in the morning light. You always fix what ain't yours. He finally turned. Only if I broke it. She didn't know what that meant, but something in the way he said it made her feel like he'd broken more than fences in his time. Maybe people, maybe promises, maybe himself. I've got tools in the shed, she said, voice softer, and some eggs on the stove if you want. He hesitated, then gave a slight nod, like she'd offered him more than just food. Later they sat on the porch, sharing breakfast in silence. She ate with her hands, tearing the bread. He used a fork like he'd been taught by someone who cared once. When the last bite was gone, she asked without looking up, "Where were you headed?" He didn't answer at first, just stared off toward the ridge. Finally, "Nowhere in particular. You always wander with just sore feet and loose change." He smiled. "Barely. I had more. Gave most away. Kept what mattered." She frowned. "Doesn't seem like you kept much." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a scrap of cloth, deep red, folded tight. He unfolded it slowly, revealing a cross stitched in white thread. Simple, worn, made by hand. "My sister gave it to me," he said, "before she died." "What happened?" "She got caught between men with guns and names. I didn't have either." The cloth trembled slightly in his hands. Though the wind hadn't picked up, he folded it again and put it back. "I fought for peace once," he said. "Didn't work out. Now I just try not to bring war where I go." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "Then you picked the wrong town." He chuckled softly, but there was no joy in it. "Seems like peace ain't welcome in most places." That afternoon she brought him old boots her husband had left behind. Sturdy leather, half a size too big. Jonah accepted them without a word. He placed them by the barn door like he'd wait for permission before wearing them. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched across the grass. She found herself walking slower as she returned to the house, glancing back more than once. That night she lit a second lantern. Not for light, just in case he looked toward the window. And deep inside her, beneath the layers of grief and grit and time, something fragile stirred. Not love, not yet, but something like the memory of warmth. Trouble always rode in quiet. It didn't come screaming through the streets, or kicking down doors. In Redwillow it traveled in whispers. Words passed from porch to porch, store to store, like seeds scattered in dry wind. By the end of that week folks were talking again. Not loud, not open, but talking. The widow had taken in another man, they said, tall, quiet, dark around the eyes. Some claimed they saw him at the edge of the field. Others swore he was sleeping in her house. Nobody knew for sure, but not knowing was enough. At the barber's, Mr. Langdon muttered, "Could be a drifter or worse." At the saloon, one of the Miller boys said, "Bet he's hiding something. Men like that always are." And on Sunday morning the preacher's voice rang sharper than usual. "There are wolves among us," he cried. "Men who come wearing peace on their tongues but bring blood in their shadow. We must remain vigilant. We must protect the righteous from the stain of sin." The townsfolk nodded. Some said, "Amen," but more than a few glanced toward the ridge, toward the house, with the overgrown path and the barn with no windows. She heard it all, of course. Mr. Talbert gave her less change than he owed at the store. Mrs. Durham accidentally dropped a basket of apples when she passed. No one said her name, but every silence grew heavier. Even the mailman stopped delivering letters. One morning as she was hanging clothes on the line, she saw movement near the ridge. Evan Pike again, this time with a friend, crouched behind a mesquite bush, watching the barn. She walked toward them, slow but steady. "You looking for something?" she asked. Tommy grinned. "Just curious. Pa says you got a killer hiding in there." Her eyes narrowed. Is that what he says? He says maybe you're sweet on him like you were with the last one. The slap came before she knew she'd moved. Tommy stumbled back, hand to his cheek, eyes wide. His friend bolted. She stared down at him, breathing hard. You tell your father if he's got something to say to me he can come himself. Tommy ran, his pride bleeding faster than his face. She didn't tell Jonah, but that night he found her outside, hands buried in soil, pulling weeds that weren't even there. You okay? He asked. She didn't look up. They're stirring. I'll go. No, she said too quickly. Then quieter. Not yet. He knelt beside her. I don't want to bring you harm. You didn't. He was silent. She added. They just needed a reason. In the darkness he reached out, not to touch her, but to hand her a folded duty. It was yellowed with age, faded. She opened it slowly. A child's handwriting. Come home, Mama cries every night. I haven't been home in 17 years, he said. Didn't even know I had a sister until that letter showed up. By the time I got there, the house was empty. She folded the note back. Home, she murmured. Funny word for something most of us never had. The wind shifted, and in that silence, the kind that comes before a storm, they both knew something was coming. Not words, not whispers, but men, and those never came softly. The next morning she woke to the sound of steel on wood, not the gentle clink of chores, but the harsh scrape of a shovel hitting dry ground. From the window she saw Jonah digging. Behind the barn, a small hole neat and slow, like a man preparing a grave or trying not to wake something buried. She stepped outside barefoot, arms crossed, tight against the morning chill. You planning on leaving something? He didn't stop digging, planning on letting something go. When the hole was done, he pulled a bundle from inside the barn, wrapped in leather, tied with twine, stained in patches like it had once been red. She didn't ask what it was, but she watched as he lowered it in, covered it with dirt, and pressed it flat with his palm like sealing a wound. I used to be someone else, he said, still facing the earth. Name meant something then, carried weight. Men followed it. Others ran from it. She walked closer. What was the name? He stood slowly, dust on his hands, eyes darker than usual. Jonah Jennings. The name didn't mean anything to her. Not yet, but something in the way he said it made the sky seem quieter. I was a scout during the war, saw more blood than most men drink in a lifetime. Afterward they called me a hero in towns I never saved, a murderer in others I never visited. Which was true, she asked. Depends who you ask. He wiped his hands on his trousers, then met her eyes. But that name got a lot of good people killed. So I buried it, she nodded. Then what do I call you? He shrugged. Just Jonah's fine. She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. That afternoon, as she churned butter in the kitchen, she heard hoofbeats. Not one horse, several. She stepped onto the porch just in time to see 4 riders pass the edge of her land. They didn't stop, didn't wait, but one of them tipped his hat and spat toward her fence post. She knew the look. It wasn't curiosity anymore, it was warning. When she returned to the kitchen, Jonah was sitting at the table. His shoulders were stiff, jaw tight. I'll leave tonight, he said. No, you won't. They're circling. They always circle, she replied. Doesn't mean they have claws, he shook his head. They don't need claws, just rope. She sat across from him. Then let them come. Why, he asked. Why take this risk for someone you don't even know? She didn't answer right away, just poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one to him. When my husband died, she said, they didn't just bury him, they buried me too. I've been walking around with dirt in my lungs ever since. She leaned forward. You showed up like a ghost. Didn't ask for saving. Didn't ask for food. Just breathed like someone who still knew what it cost to be alive. She stared at her cup. That was enough. They drank in silence, the kind that binds instead of breaks. And somewhere beyond the ridge, in a saloon filled with half-truths and full mugs, the name Jonah Jennings was whispered by a drunk with a badge, who once watched him walk away from a tea massacre. The town didn't need proof, only a reason, and by nightfall it had one. The horse was found at dawn. Old Sheriff Barrett got the call before breakfast. Something spooked the preacher's mare during the night. They found it tangled in barbed wire, throat cut open, eyes wide like it had seen a demon. No money was missing, no prints, but hooves. But a stranger was in town, and that was enough. By noon word had spread to every porch and every pew. The man at the widow's place had blood on his hands. Reverend Wills didn't name him directly in his sermon, but he didn't have to. Peaceful men do not hide in barns, he thundered, and no good thing grows in the shadow. The Miller boys took it further. They'd seen the stranger near the creek last week. He'd looked off, like someone with guilt chasing his back. Evan Pike swore he'd heard the widow arguing with him at night. By sundown, a name was on everyone's lips: Jonah Jennings. They dug out old newspapers, yellowed and brittle, found stories of ambushes during the war, of raids blamed on a scout who rode alone and left no survivors. The articles never proved much, but the legend had done its work. Jennings butcher, ghost in gray, peacebreaker. It didn't matter if it was true, it mattered that it was him. At the widow's home, Jonah sat sharpening a blade in the barn. Not a weapon, just a whittling knife. He worked slow, focused, carving a figure out of old cedar. She watched from the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. "They're coming, aren't they?" he asked. She nodded. Sheriff came by, didn't step off his horse, just said there'd be questions. He stopped carving. "I should go. If you go, they'll say it proves guilt. If I stay, it gives them a target." She stepped into the barn, then let them shoot through me. He looked up sharply. "Don't say that. I mean it." "No," he said. "You've already lost enough." She didn't blink. "That's the point. When you lose everything, you stop being afraid of losing more." Outside, thunder rolled over the hills, the kind of storm that didn't bring rain, just noise. A warning from the sky. That night she loaded the old shotgun her father left her. It barely fired straight, but it looked like it could. Sometimes that was enough. She lit one lantern, then put it out. She told Jonah to stay in the barn, no matter what. When she stepped onto the porch, wind tugging at her dress, she saw torches down the road. 5 men, maybe 6, moving slow, like justice could be patient when it wanted blood. At their front stood Sheriff Barrett, hat low, voice gravel. "We just want to talk, then come back in daylight. You're harboring a fugitive. I'm giving shelter to a man who hasn't wronged me. Others say different." She raised the shotgun. "Then maybe you should believe someone who isn't afraid of you." There was a pause, long enough for lightning to split the sky. Then a voice from behind the torch line. "She's in love with him, just like the last one. She'll lie to keep him safe." Laughter. Spit. She didn't lower the gun. "I'm not hiding a killer," she said. "I'm standing between one and a lynch mob." And in the silence that followed, everyone knew the rope was already tied. Now all they needed was someone to drag it. The night air tasted like iron. Storm in the distance. Blood in the wind. Jonah lay flat under the floorboards of the barn, body pressed against cold earth, breath held like a prayer. Above him the world waited to shatter. The widow had barred the door from the outside. "No heroics," she'd said. "If you want peace, then stay quiet, and let me deal with the chaos." Now he was hidden beneath bales of hay, and a trapdoor no one had touched in years, dust thick enough to choke a man. He closed his eyes, listening. Hoofbeats. 6, maybe 7 horses. Voices low, boots in gravel, metal clinking like spurs against conscience. Then silence. She stood at the front gate, shotgun in hand. Her back was straight, chin high, nightgown tucked into her boots. She looked like Death's wife. "Come to make a deal." Sheriff Barrett dismounted. "Evening, ma'am." She said nothing. "We want Jonah Jennings. He ain't here. We saw him." "You saw a ghost." Dunley glanced back at the men behind him. Deputies, ranchers, a few drunks with pride too big to sit still. "This doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is," she said. "You brought fire to a home that ain't burned you. You think you know him. You don't. That man's left corpses in his path from Tennessee to New Mexico. I've seen killers. He ain't one. You seen him with blood on his hand. I've seen him with a broken foot mending fences and thanking me for eggs." The sheriff took a step closer. She cocked the shotgun. "I shoot snakes," she warned, "even the ones with badges." A murmur ran through the group. One man dismounted, hand on his holster. Another pulled a rope from his saddle. "She didn't cinch. You raised that rope," she said, "and you better tie 2 ends. Dunley's jaw tightened. "He's a wanted man. He's a man," she snapped. "And that's more than I can say for most of you right now." Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but it echoed louder than thunder in her ears. Dunley heard it too, eyes narrowed. "He's in there." "No, he ain't." He stepped forward. She raised the gun higher. One more step and, "I swear, sheriff or not." But she didn't finish, because behind the barn something exploded. A lantern. Fire bloomed like a curse, licking at the dry wood. Flames danced along the wall, chasing shadow and smoke into the sky. Someone had circled around. She spun, yelling, "Jonah, don't." But it was too late. He burst from the side door, coughing. Arms up, not in surrender, but in defense from smoke and death. The men turned, startled. One raised a pistol. She screamed. The shot never came. because Dunley of all people raised his hand. Hold your fire. The mob froze. Jonah stood still, flames behind him. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a man burned by sorrow. The widow ran to him, threw her arms around his chest, not caring who saw. She protected me, he rasped. Now I protect her. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Dunley sighed. Let's put the fire out. No one dies tonight. The men grumbled, unsure, but no one stepped forward. And somehow that was enough. For now, by morning, the barn was nothing but smoke and ash. The fire hadn't spread to the house. Jonah had dragged a water barrel by hand, dousing the back wall through the night. His palms were blistered, his shoulders raw, but he said nothing about the pain. The townsfolk had left without another word. No apologies, no confessions, just retreat, slow, shuffling, uncertain, like men who'd caught a glimpse of something. They didn't understand. The widow swept her porch as if it were any other day. When Jonah came to sit beside her, she didn't look up. They'll be back, he said. I know. They won't bring torches next time, just bullets. She nodded. Still won't open the gate. He turned toward her, eyes tired. Why? She stopped sweeping. The quiet between them stretched long and sharp, like it could snap at any second. Because this time I'm not just burying someone, she said. I'm standing with him. He looked away, jaw clenched. You're not meant to stay in places like this, she added. Men like you don't belong to the earth. You belong to stories, myth. People need someone to blame and someone else to believe in. I'm not either of those, he said. I'm just tired, she nodded. Then rest here. But rest was never part of the plan. By midday a letter arrived, tied to a rock thrown at the base of her gate. No signature, just 4 words written in ink that bled into the paper. Leave before Sunday night. She burned the letter without telling Jonah. Instead, she went to the attic and opened an old trunk. Inside were the remnants of a life long buried. Her husband's journal, a wedding shawl, a church hymnal with pages missing, and beneath it all, a folded map, not of escape, but of confrontation. She had known this town her whole life, knew the trails behind the church, the way the wind shifted before a fight, the people who led and the ones who followed. She wasn't naive, she wasn't suicidal, but she was finished running. That evening, as the sun bled across the sky, she put on her husband's old coat, too long in the sleeves, too warm for spring. She tied her hair back, stood tall, and walked into town alone. The saloon went quiet when she stepped in. Men stopped their games. A piano key echoed unfinished. She walked up to Sheriff Barrett, sitting with a bottle in hand. I want the truth, she said. Is there a bounty? He looked at her for a long while. 500, he muttered. Dead, or alive. Army posted it last year. Word never reached here, till now. Then you know what they'll do. He nodded. She leaned in close, her voice low and sharp. Then you tell them. If they come through me. And if they want blood, they'll have to explain to their children why they spilled a dead woman's first. She turned and walked out. No one stopped her. Back at the cabin, Jonah was waiting, gun in hand, not loaded, just held. They'll ride tonight, he said. Then he looked at her, really looked. You don't seem scared. I'm always afraid, she replied. I just don't let fear choose who I stand beside. And with that they waited, side by side, for a war neither had started, and one neither planned to lose. The storm came before the riders. Thunder cracked over the ridge, like a warning shot from heaven. Rain swept in waves, heavy and cold, turning dust to mud and torches to steam. It was the kind of weather that softened rage, but not always enough to stop it. They came anyway. 5 horses soaked to the bone, men wrapped in oilskins, faces shadowed. They carried rifles, slung low, and a rope coiled tight, like justice had become something they could hold in their fists. The widow was ready. She stood in the doorway, lantern lit behind her, casting her silhouette long and firm across the porch. Jonah was nowhere in sight. The men dismounted slowly. No shouts this time, no jeers, just quiet steps through the wet grass. Sheriff Barrett didn't come, but his deputy did, and 3 ranchers, and a man she didn't recognize. Clean-shaven, polished boots. The kind of government hunter who came late but always claimed the kill. You know why we're here, the stranger said. I know what you're chasing, she replied. He stepped closer. You're obstructing the law. She raised the shotgun. I'm honoring the truth. The man smirked. Truth don't pay bounties. Lightning flashed. Behind them, the barn's ashes smoked under the rain. Then a sound. Footsteps on wet wood. Jonah stepped onto the porch from the side, calm as prey. His shirt stuck to his back, hair dripping, eyes sharp.
He wasn't armed, just present. "I'm here," he said. The men turned, startled. One raised his rifle, another flinched. Jonah didn't move. "You want me? Take me, but don't touch her." The widow stepped between them before anyone could speak. "No." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's done." "No, it isn't," she said, eyes on the stranger. "You came to take Ghost, but he already buried that name." The stranger chuckled. "What he buried won't matter when we hang."